welcome back to the show. So excited to have you. I can't wait to introduce you to our guest today, Aimee Schuster. No, I didn't say Amy Schumer. I didn't. We just recently had Chris Rock on the show, and it wasn't that Chris Rock either, but apparently we're getting closer and closer, and I am here for it. Here's a little bit about Aimee before we dive in. As a founder and CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, COO, Chief Operating Officer, she is with Bandwidth Strategy, a company that she created, and she supports, get this, 5 million to 100 million major revenue companies in creating, growing, and improving their marketing departments. Do you see why I needed to chat with her sans Matt today? I needed to hear all the things. She helps them execute on lead generation and overall brand awareness. Aimee has sat in companies that you probably know, like Miller Heiman Group, Yello, SimplyBe here in Chicagoland, and even HomeFinder. So I can't wait to dive into everything that she has to share.
Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you.
Hey, just a reminder, our show is brought to you by SmartCookie Media, where we believe data tells a story, and not just any story, your business story. As a subscriber to the show or as a client, you'll get insights on profitable, data-driven marketing strategies that work for you and your business, your industry, not some cookie cutter trends. No, ideas that are led by your customer data so you know they'll work for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram to learn more. Everything's in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. Aimee, welcome to the show. So excited to have you.
Nicole, thank you so much for having me.
How would you finish this sentence? You know you're an entrepreneur when?
So we talked a little bit in the pre-show about how I'm not a typical entrepreneur. So what I would say is, you know you're an entrepreneur when you realize that you need an integrator. Like, an entrepreneur has such an amazing skill set to believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're going to succeed, right? You have to believe that. You have to go against the grain. You have to say, I know 90% of the businesses fail, but I will be the 10%. And that gets you really, really far down the road. And then once you start succeeding, you realize that all the other things that go along with being a business owner, business runner, those are the kinds of things that you really start to need an integrator for. So once you reach that point, I think you really realize you're an entrepreneur because you were able to do the thing that is so hard, and now you need some help.
Yeah. So I think I've read the similar books that you have when you say integrator. But for everybody else listening that maybe didn't get it or they're busy distracted with something and you just stop them in their tracks, what's an integrator?
When it comes to this particular instance, these are the people that are coming in and creating systems for your business. It is creating sales marketing alignment. It is putting the operational elements in place. It's setting up the technical systems. It's setting up the employee systems. It's doing all the things that have nothing to do with the exciting vision that you as an entrepreneur have for how you're going to change the world. No entrepreneur starts and is like, oh my God, yes, I get to create 401k contributions. So the integrator is doing all the things that come with creating a business, but aren't the things that necessarily light up an entrepreneur.
Right. Like the entrepreneur said they want to set the world on fire in this way or that way. And it might be we want to have a great company culture where people build wealth. And then you come in and you're like, okay, well, that looks like a wellness plan, a 401k, this, that, a match, things like that.
And to be fair, that is certainly things I do on the operational side too. I think, being in more of my role as a CMO, COO with a sales marketing angle, it is, how do we create awareness? How do we get more leads? How do we make sure we're capturing the right leads and putting them through the right email channels, getting them to our sales team? How do we hire a sales team? How do we make sure that the sales and marketing team are actually talking to each other?
Mhm.
All of that stuff. Yeah, which is, as you know, never easy. So I would say it is all the super tactical stuff that either as a first-time entrepreneur or even sometimes in your second or third business, like depending on how far you got in the first one, it probably hasn't come up yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Here's another word that we're going to talk a lot about that I thought you could give your explanation on is you are a fractional CMO and COO. And, I've read the book, a recent book. I have loved the language around it. I thought for sure it was only going to get stuck on like fractional COOs or only stuck on fractional CEOs. And I've been appreciating that. Oh, wait, CMOs are getting their letters dropped in there too. But talk to us about fractional, because I think you're going to wow some of our decision makers of businesses. They're listening in. They're not all entrepreneurs. Some of them are making decisions for large organizations. And I think that's such a new way of looking at the work that is done. And then also, I think you're just going to help other entrepreneurs be like, oh, Okay. So just a fraction, but wow.
Absolutely. To me, the difference between a fractional and a consultant, which is really where the difference is, and truthfully, I do both. Fractional means that I probably have an email address with that organization. I'm with them somewhere between 15 to 20 hours a week. I've got most likely a 6-month contract, maybe more. And I'm really privy to the strategy that's going on at that organization. I'm trying to help them with things like setting up operational elements, evaluating people, looking at technical systems, looking at sales marketing alignment, bridging those gaps. It's the type of strategic and tactical work that you can't do on a what I would say, quote unquote, consulting basis, because you really need to get enmeshed with the team. What I don't have to do anymore are the more political things that are involved. When you're a 40-hour a week W-2 employee, the CEO knows that the decisions I'm making and the recommendations that I'm bringing are really for the benefit of the company. I'm not trying to keep my job. So I think that's really freeing. I've also found that a lot of times CEOs feel much more comfortable confiding in me as a resource to deal with issues they're having on their C-suite because they're not my peers. I'm a consultant. I'm a 1099 most of the time. Consulting work is more of a specific engagement where I'm working with an organization. I don't have an email address, probably not a long-term contract. I'm not really privy to financial information. But they just need some specific marketing, some specific sales, some specific operational work that I'm able to come in and do and then exit out and hand over to them. So that's how I think of it. There's a number of different organizations out there that have sort of defined it. There's also this concept of interim and how that's different, but I really put them in that either fractional or consulting buckets.
Yeah. And what I love, and you used the word once or twice, was just being a little bit closer to the team, right? Like it's such a difference when you say like, oh, we have this consultant coming in. It's very, I've been there when I worked corporate, right? It's very at us.
Yeah.
It's their strategy. It's their way. And that doesn't mean that it always goes smoothly either, but it does mean like, okay, BCG Consulting Group, like they're coming in, they're going to tell you and either gets accepted or it doesn't. Whereas, hey, we're bringing somebody in alongside to supplement what we already do here. That just to me makes sense for morale purposes and effective strategies. Of course, it also makes sense for P&L purposes too. I would like to understand though, before we dive just a little farther into your story, what happens with some of those you work with that already have a COO, already have a CMO? Are you a supplement to them? No, are you stepping in completely because they don't have one? Tell me about that.
More the latter. The situation is more likely that a CMO has been exited from the business in one way or the other. Sometimes they've looked to bring another junior level employee up to that place, and maybe that hasn't worked. They are having P&L issues. They may, in fact, be having either purchase negotiations or next round of funding negotiations. And to your point, they don't want someone else on the books right now. So it's a really nice opportunity to get someone like myself who has 2 decades of experience, who knows how to run teams, who understands technology, but to not have to pay them what you pay for a full-time CMO and equity and cap table and all the things. You get a lot of resources for not as much commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's spot on. Exactly that. Okay. So tell me, what's your story? What
Mm.
led you to entrepreneurship and certainly being an integrator?
Yeah, I was super sad that Matt's not here because I was going to get to spar on legal marketing with him. Because
Oh.
I spent my first 8 years in legal marketing. Had
See,
this
Matt, this is why you should have been at the 9:30 booking this morning.
Oh,
Just say, Matt, this is why. He's got a long drive to get over this way. So that's cool.
yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, when you guys come to Chicago and we do the
We
live,
will.
it'll be you, me, and Matt. But I started in legal marketing. I came out of school in 2001 and we were still faxing press releases. That's the reality of the world I came into. We had desktop computers, email systems were nascent. I built the first company's first website. So it was just a really different world. And as I evolved in my legal marketing career through the first sort of 8 years of being out of school, I really obviously saw so much of that digital marketing wave coming. And I knew, and again, would love to have Matt here for this, lawyers aren't usually the first ones to want to do something new and exciting, right? I also knew that all of the cool technologies that were coming were not interested in me because of my background. So I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug and started my own company. It was called EcoScene. We reviewed eco-friendly products and services. very much in the same vein for those of you listening that are of this age as Daily Candy and Thrillist. And I was able to build that over about a 3-year period and sold it to a company here in Chicago, then called Viewpoints, now called Power Reviews. And that really jump-started the next half of my career, which was starting and scaling marketing departments at startups, usually post-Series A startups here in Chicago. That was point number 1 of transition, right? Point number 2 of transition, where I am today, was post the sale of Miller Heiman Group, which was where I was a global CMO starting in 2017. They sold to Korn Ferry and the C-suite was out December 2019. So I thought, I was going to take a little break and come back and do a startup again. And lo and behold, the pandemic changed that. I would love to say I was purposeful about this. I knew exactly what I was doing, but I got bit again in a different way this time. I wasn't looking to build a business. I was looking to build the type of consultancy where I could do the work I wanted to do in an environment I wanted to do it. And that was how I built Bandwidth and how I got ahead of this fractional wave about 3 years ago.
So you say caught the wave. Do you think that wave was born because of 2020? Do you think it was coming, but 2020, made it more real?
So I did a little bit of research into the term fractional CMO and how often it had been searched pre-2020. I have this in an article that I'm publishing, but I think 2018, it was searched something like 200 times in a year. Last year, it was searched over 2,000 times. So the wave is real. This idea of fractional, whether it's fractional CMO, COO, all the letters, as you described it at the beginning, is very real. Is it born out of the pandemic? I think the pandemic accelerated everything in our lives. And I think it accelerated this process too. Part of the issue, and maybe it's unique to marketing, or maybe that's just the world that I mostly lived in, is the average tenure of a CMO was sub 36 months. Like most CMOs don't get the chance to really do the type of work they're good at because there's just so much churn. And a lot of us were just getting more and more frustrated by that. And there's an opportunity where you can do all the things you want to do and not do the things you don't want to do and get paid pretty much the same money. So been really appealing. Plus, on the CEO side, you're getting all that experience without all the other things we just talked about.
So you mentioned the tenure of CMOs, 36 months. So let's dive into that just a little bit. I read something recently. It wasn't a stat. It was really just an acknowledgement that many times, particularly as a marketing department, the entire department, I always joke that they look at the marketing department sometimes as the drama club team or like something from like high school. They're like, they got the ideas or they got the plans. And that means that sometimes some of the ideas don't come across the table. So I'm sure part of that churn is either it wasn't a good fit or that marketer gets, frustrated by not being able to make their moves, a team that, just fumbles because they can't quite get the traction. I've worked in those environments. So I certainly know that a lot of teams can get some pushback when they're in marketing. It almost feels like when somebody is already in as corporate, you have to constantly manage the boss. Hey, you guys hired me. You guys hired us to do the thing, to create the plan. And then you tie our hands. Yet when they bring in an expert or a consultant or now a fractional somebody, all of a sudden it's like, well, we hired them. We're going to listen to them. Yet they hired both. And it seems like one gets a little farther than the other. Can you give an example, maybe a story of like a time you were like trying to push something through and how much easier that might be when you come in with this role?
Everything I've ever recommended as a W-2 is everything I recommend as a 1099, but now I'm brilliant. My philosophies, my methodologies, they haven't changed. It's all about perspective.
Oh my gosh.
I don't have a particular story. It's not an apples to apples because I was an employee at one and I'm a 1099 at another. But I will say, I think it comes down to the CEO feeling like they can trust you based on the experiences that you've had, the ability to say she's an expert, and that you're not in the politics. And more importantly, you're not trying to keep your job. That's incredibly freeing experience. I write into all of my contracts 30-day outs on both sides. And I've never needed to pull one, but I have the option to leave if it's not working. And that's not a threat. It is a very collegial experience because they know what they want from me and I know what I want from them. I am evaluating these people based on my understanding of how well they can do the job. there's nuance to everything, and that comes into play. And I'm a pretty decent people manager, so I get it, but they're not my people. Like nothing's precious to me when I come in and do this stuff too, which I think is really helpful. No CEO understands how Salesforce and HubSpot integrate unless you work at HubSpot or Salesforce, right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
you bought these systems, you don't understand how they work together. You might know enough to be dangerous, and you eventually come to me and say, I don't understand the data, and I don't understand why my sales and marketing teams can't agree on the data. And like, that's because they've never sat down to talk about it. I can facilitate that as a third party to say, okay, guys, like we're all going to get in a room, Zoom room, real room, done both. And we're going to agree on what all the terms are and what all the SLAs are between each other. How long does sales have to respond? How long can a lead stay in a particular state before it has to stop along the funnel or move to close lost, and why? And how do you get your sales and marketing leaders to agree on that? They all have to sit in a room and talk to each other. And then they have to keep talking to each other at least once a month. I prefer those meetings to be twice a month. I am someone who has done this multiple times, so I can come in with the authority to say, this is what's going to work for your organization going forward.
Yes. Yeah, I explain to our clients a lot of times that, they might have concerns or worries as we move on to a campaign or a project or just begin work together. And they'll have all this worry. And I'm like, I'm with you in that. Like, I understand that feeling. I can empathize. I get it. However, I know that the bridge actually crosses. Like, I know that it's not out, and that your biggest worry has worked for so many people in your exact position before. And that if we apply these strategies, we've got these other examples on how it's worked. I did have one client recently say to me, but I'm the person who always learns the worst things. Like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen with me. I'm like, maybe we're not fit together then. Like, if you're going to go in with that, I don't know if I want you to be that example to me. But I love that example of you have skin in the game because you're part of that team, but not so much that you have to bring tulips when so-and-so's dog dies because you're playing office politics.
Yeah,
that may or may not be a real story.
It's a very freeing place to be, and it's an opportunity to get a lot done quickly. Most fractionals come with a playbook, right? You mentioned the BCG example of how they come with their, what do they call it? The thunk of the report and the playbook. I would say most independent fractionals have that as well. It's just honed on a different level, especially if you're able to diagnose exactly the type of organization you want to work with. For me, it's B2B organizations that don't sell a thing you can get at a store. Like I tell people I sell the invisible. I get it. Your business is unique, but your problems aren't. I've seen this before, and we can pretty quickly fix what's wrong by just putting in place a couple of different tools and techniques to get your teams talking and get the lead flow working.
Oh, so good. So good. Yeah, if Matt was here, he'd be laughing because I'm smiling big because there are plenty of times that I tell someone, you're a unique snowflake until I sit with the next person. I love the way that you said it much better than I, that the problems are the same and we can solve those. That's great. So let's talk about that for a bit. Anyone that supports a founder or an entrepreneur, we love to interview on the show. And I always think that you have, and you bring all of these unique perspectives on serial entrepreneurs and people who have done it more than one time. And you see how and what it takes to take new ideas and repeatedly help someone, or even just get to watch them, turn them into successful strategies. Because that's what serial entrepreneurs are to us. It's not someone that's maybe managing 8 businesses all at once, although we've had them on the show, but maybe it's been, a couple in their lifetime. So can you talk a little bit about what it really takes to take new ideas and just repeatedly have those wins?
Yeah, I will say that I am probably the person who's sitting and co-piloting with that person, right? Because I'm not the one who comes up with the crazy ideas. I come up with crazy marketing ideas and campaigns and that type of thing. But in terms of what we talked about at the beginning, the serial entrepreneur who is going to believe beyond any shadow of doubt that they're going to succeed, if they've got a good integrator next to them, whatever that integrator looks like, they're going to be able to keep going. So I would say that's really where my perspective is. How can I make it so that that entrepreneur can try the things they want to within reason? And I think once you get big enough, that's part of the trouble, right? You think you're still at that startup stage, and you think you can still, be the person who's just throwing things up against the wall and hoping they stick. And then, you reach a certain point where that's not necessarily possible, like in the current look and feel of where the business is. And those are the places and the times that I love to be there, because I can figure out how to take the stuff that they want to throw against the wall and see if we can pilot it in a different way, beta in it in a different way, make it work within the system that exists right now that they've already built that they may or may not be bored with right now. Like, how can we make their new idea work within the business that they've got to keep them going and keep them interested?
As entrepreneurs, we need people around us to support us. We also need people to be a red light, green light, right? Maybe even a yellow. And how does that go for you? I remember working with a startup and I remember asking them that exact question. Are you ready for a red light or a yellow light? Of course, a green light, but like, can you handle that type of feedback? And, it was an interesting conversation.
So I talk about this in some of my writing, that I've been a student of improv for many, many years. And one of the most beneficial components of that is learning the yes and strategy.
Yes.
Instead of the that's a dumb idea. It's yeah. And have you thought about X, Y, and Z and how that's going to impact it? You don't shut down someone's idea, you embrace it and you ask them some correlating questions. But I do think that sometimes that can seem a bit pedantic, and I don't mean it to. Once you create a nice enough relationship with a founder, you can do the yes and, but you can also have the real conversation of, here's what I think you're trying to get to. Here are some of the struggles I think that might be happening. Like, can we talk about that? And what are your thoughts on X? But I also think trying, at least before you have that relationship, to yes and your way into some of those conversations is really helpful.
I love that. I remember actually the first time reading it inside of Tina Fey's book. I don't know if this is true or not, but I almost saw it as like she wrote like a little mini guide, and it may even have like a graphic around it, but it was exactly that. And I almost stood up and cheered. I was like, that's it. Such an unlock. So helpful. Because I remember other professional women, somebody one time was like, can you ask some questions that maybe just are a little aloof in this next board meeting? And I was like, what do you mean? Well, some of the people with players here, you haven't met them yet, but you might just need to be aloof. And I was like, wait, what? And I was so turned off by that. I was so bothered by it. And then Tina and improv comedy all over the place opened this up with like, this is something I can get behind. A yes and, is that legal? A yes and, have we done it before? And of course, more honey, less vinegar, right?
I worked with someone at Miller Heiman Group, our CPO at the time, and I learned watching her in board meetings. It was a freaking masterclass. She used this one phrase, tell me more. Tell me more. And I have stolen that and adopted that. Dana Hammerschlag, she is just,
I love it.
I love her. I just learned so much from watching her. She was brilliant. Tell me more. And you immediately saw people's defenses go down. And she did it to me. And I was like, oh, I don't have an answer. I love that.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so let's talk about a case study of yours. Let's talk about what you do. We've talked certainly a lot about it, but would you share a few things on how someone's brought you in? Maybe somebody listening can really understand and get a good picture.
Going back to my last full-time role was with a company called Miller Heiman Group, which for anyone out there in sales, Miller Heiman Group was one of the very first sales training methodologies that existed, became a lot of basis for a number of other ones. About a year, maybe not even into being Fractional, I was approached by Challenger, which is another really interesting and great sales technology and training that came out of Gartner. They sold to private equity 5 or 6 years ago, and I know the CEO over there. And she was looking for marketing help, and so came on board with them and stayed with them for about 18 months. So it was a really long engagement, but we just kept finding more and more opportunities. The need there was both brand awareness and sales marketing alignment, as well as we got further and further into it, really owning their narrative and being able to understand who was coming in the door from an SEO perspective and how we managed the website specifically. It became a true reboot of the entire department, the website, the sales marketing alignment, soup to nuts, pretty much everything that we had to do for the organization, and then turned it over to the next head, who's the VP of marketing there now. And so that was a really successful arc for me. We were able to turn the team and turn the messaging, and, it's been a really fun ride, and I'm so really close with the CEO now.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Hey there, busy movers and shakers. I get it. You're out there conquering the business world, hustling day in, day out. Well, guess what? We've got something to amplify your efforts, something that's about to make your entrepreneurial journey even more exciting. Introducing our podcast production services, your ticket to sharing your knowledge and stories without breaking a sweat. We know your time is gold. That's why Our team of podcast pros will take the reins, handle all of the behind the scenes stuff. From brainstorming fun topics, introducing you to incredible guests, polishing up those episodes, repurposing your content so you can share among lots of platforms. We're here to turn your ideas into a podcast that's as easygoing as your favorite chat over coffee. Imagine establishing your expertise and your authority, making connections all across the globe in just minutes a month. And the fun doesn't end there. Our data-savvy approach gives you insights that will help you fine-tune your content and connect with your audience even better than before. So join forces with a crew that's as enthusiastic about your podcast as you are about your business, the SmartCookie Media crew. Let your voice resonate, your stories inspire, and your ideas spread like wildfire. Level up your personal brand through the magic of podcasting, whether you choose audio only or video too. Are you ready to dive into podcasting? Your journey to share your knowledge starts right here because it's your voice, your podcast with our expertise. SmartCookie Media, turning your stories into conversations. The one question that popped in my mind just now was, what would you tell somebody that's considering this move? They may not have had the experience of a leap from legal marketing into your own thing, and they may not have exactly the catalyst of 2020 shutdown, but tell me a little bit about how they'd make a few moves if you were to restart.
So I meet with quite a few people on a regular basis who are looking to move to fractional. And I have this hierarchy of fractional need that I created, which is number one, can you get health insurance, which is an annoyingly American problem. But I think it's real. And I think people need to think about it very specifically. If you are a solo earner or a head of family earner and you don't have an easy way to get health insurance, that's something to be considered. If that is not a barrier to you, number two on the hierarchy is, do you have a network? I get a lot of folks who are maybe 10 years out of school. And I'm like, listen, have you been doing this long enough? Do you have enough people that are in your sphere, that are in your world, who've gotten to positions of power, who can help you get your clients? A lot of times, I think people have to take a really long look in the mirror and say, like, I haven't been doing this quite long enough yet to guarantee that I have that network. And then number three, does this type of work light you up? And what I mean by that is not all of my gigs are 18 months. Some are 3 months, some are 6 months. And a lot of the stuff I put in place, I don't get to see it to fruition. That's okay for me. I like that type of work. I was always the person who liked the beginning of a new job. I like that excitement. I like the start. I don't need that. I'm not like everybody. Some people really need to see the satisfaction of their programs and their ideas coming to life. If that is you and you want a more long-term trajectory with an organization, fractional work isn't for you. I try to have that hierarchy of need as a basis of conversation. And it doesn't matter if you want to be a CPO or a fractional CPO, a fractional CMO, or whatever you're looking to do. To me, those are pretty universal and help you frame up like, yeah, this is, I think it would work for me. And more times than not, I meet with people who are like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. And that's really great too, because then you can focus all your effort on finding another job.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though you're an integrator, Aimee, I'm going to tell you, entrepreneurs are all about starting. And sometimes to their detriment, they're like, oh, maybe I'm not a finisher, right? They worry like, oh, maybe I'm not a finisher. But when we can all lean into our strengths of like, no, like starting a project is hard, apparently for others. Like for us types, we're like, let's go. So I think you just spoke to certainly me in that moment, but I think a whole lot of others would recognize like, I can start something. I'll check in on them later and see if it made it across the finish line. So, oh my goodness, so good. What is one of the key lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur that might be a mantra or something you say again and again?
So in addition to the yes and is the just say yes. I think more times than not, and it doesn't come across very well, but I am more of an introvert and I would much rather be sitting behind my computer marketing other people than marketing myself. So I have to force myself to say yes to a lot of different meetings, events, networking opportunities, et cetera, that otherwise I'd just be like, oh no, I just want to stay in my sweatpants and stay home. So saying yes to those opportunities, I've never once regretted going. And I know that. I just got to get myself over the hurdle. And so the hurdle is saying yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I had one whole year of like, I'm like going to say yes. If somebody said it, I'm going to say yes. And then they came out with that movie Yes Day. And I'm like, wait a second. That was my idea, but it was a whole year. That was my idea. What is your definition of entrepreneurial success for Bandwidth Strategy?
Oh my gosh. So entrepreneurial success for me, I listened to one of your podcasts with, was it Leon McDonald, to like spend time with friends. I think that's pretty accurate for me. I guess more than anything, it's to own your own schedule. And I think that sounds very romantic to people. And they were like, well, you don't have a boss. I'm like, everybody has a boss.
We have 17 of them.
Yeah, exactly. You will always have a boss, but you do own your schedule. And there's something really empowering about that. So I would say that to me, as I run Bandwidth Strategy, as I approach the next years of my working life, like that to me is really helpful and I would consider success.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, mine is anything about time and freedom of finances, right? Like to know that there is opportunity, to know that this isn't the cap or the ceiling. Yeah.
Yep.
What's next for you? Or is there a link you want to share with us so we can learn more about what you offer? Maybe there's a download, something like that.
So bandwidthstrategy.com is my URL. Love connecting with folks on LinkedIn like you. I have a new article hopefully coming out pretty soon all about Fractional and sort of what I talked about.
Aimee, appreciate you so much.
You too. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You've been listening to the Serial Entrepreneur Show, produced by the team here at SmartCookie Media.